I walked up the familiar stone pathway to my childhood home, carrying a bottle of wine and wearing my favorite navy blue dress. Sunday dinners at my parents' house had been a tradition for as long as I could remember, but something felt different this time. The porch light cast shadows that seemed darker than usual, and my mother, Martha, stood waiting at the front door with an expression I'd never seen before, cold, distant. My father, Robert, sat rigid at the dining table, while my younger brother, Tyler, avoided eye contact completely. After we finished eating Mom's pot roast in uncomfortable silence, Dad cleared his throat with the gravity of a courtroom announcement. "Eloise," he said, "we've made a decision about your future relationship with this family." The words that followed still echo in my mind like a nightmare I can't wake up from. My father's voice was steady and calculated as he explained that my lifestyle choices and stubborn independence had become incompatible with their family values. They'd grown tired of my refusal to settle down, get married, and follow the path they'd envisioned for me. At 28, I was apparently too old to still be playing around with my marketing career instead of focusing on finding a husband and starting a family. My mother retrieved a cardboard box from the hallway closet filled with my old photo albums, high school yearbooks, and childhood keepsakes. She placed it on the table between us like evidence in a trial. "We need your house key," she said quietly, extending her palm. When I hesitated, my father stood up and his chair scraped against the hardwood floor with a sound like fingernails on a chalkboard. "You heard your mother. Give us the key and leave." Tyler finally looked at me, but his eyes were filled with something I couldn't identify. Shame. Fear, guilt. He opened his mouth as if to speak, then closed it again and stared down at his plate. I fumbled with my keychain, my hands shaking as I removed the brass key I'd carried for over a decade. The metal felt heavier than it should have as I placed it in my mother's waiting hand. "Don't come back, Eloise," my father said, walking toward the front door. "You are not part of this family anymore." I found myself standing on the porch steps, clutching the cardboard box against my chest, listening to the deadbolt click into place behind me. The autumn wind cut through my dress, and I realized I was crying. I don't remember driving to my best friend Jessica's apartment, but somehow I ended up on her couch at 11:30 that night, still wearing my navy dress and holding that box like it contained my entire identity. Jessica made chamomile tea and let me sleep in her spare bedroom for the rest of the week. Every morning I woke up thinking the previous Sunday had been a terrible dream, but the reality crashed over me again like waves against a rocky shore. I tried calling my parents' landline, but the automated message said the number was no longer in service. When I dialed my mother's cell phone, it went straight to voicemail. By Wednesday, I decided to try a different approach. I drove to my mother's book club at the local library thinking surely she wouldn't create a scene in public. But when I walked into the community room where 12 women sat discussing their latest romance novel selection, my mother looked at me like I was a stranger who had wandered into the wrong meeting. "I'm sorry," she said to the group, "but I don't know why this person is interrupting our discussion." The other women stared at me with confused expressions, and I felt my cheeks burn with embarrassment. Mrs. Henderson, who had known me since I was 5 years old, tilted her head and squinted as if trying to place my face. My mother had somehow convinced even their close friends that I was no longer relevant to her life. I sent flowers to their house on Thursday. The delivery driver called an hour later saying they'd been refused at the door. I left voicemails with my Aunt Patricia asking her to mediate, but she called back on Friday with devastating news. "Honey, I'm so sorry," Patricia said, her voice heavy with sympathy. "Your parents have been planning this for months. They think you're too independent, too focused on your career. They want you to understand what you're giving up by choosing your job over finding a husband and giving them grandchildren." The conversation that broke my heart completely came when Patricia revealed what she'd witnessed during a family barbecue I hadn't been invited to the previous month. My parents had spent the entire afternoon discussing their disappointment in my choices, analyzing my behavior like scientists studying a failed experiment. They'd concluded that cutting me off completely was the only way to make me realize what truly mattered in life. They think you'll come crawling back, begging for forgiveness, ready to change your ways, Patricia explained. They believe this tough love approach will finally make you settle down. That evening, I drove past my childhood home one more time. The house was dark except for the glow of the television in the living room. I parked across the street and sat there for an hour, remembering summer evenings when I'd help my mother plant tulips in the front garden and winter mornings when my father would shovel the driveway before dawn so Tyler and I could get to school safely. But when I finally worked up the courage to approach the front door, I discovered they'd changed the locks. My old key was truly useless now, just a piece of metal with no purpose. I stood there on the porch where I'd taken countless family photos, feeling like a ghost, haunting my own past. The email arrived exactly 1 week after that awful Sunday dinner. I was sitting at Jessica's kitchen table applying for new apartments online since I couldn't afford to keep imposing on her hospitality, when my phone chimed with a message that would change everything. The sender was Harrison Wright, attorney at law. I recognized the name immediately because he'd handled my family's legal matters for over 15 years. The subject line made my stomach drop. "Urgent matter regarding your family. Please call immediately." My hands trembled as I opened the message. Wright's tone was professional but clearly stressed. "Miss Peterson, I need to speak with you today regarding your grandfather William's estate and recent developments with your family. This matter cannot wait. Please call my office as soon as possible." I dialed his number within minutes, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Wright's secretary put me through immediately, which never happened with busy attorneys unless something was seriously wrong. Eloise Wright said without preamble, "We have a significant problem. Can you come to my office this afternoon? I need to explain something about your grandfather's will that your parents apparently didn't know about." 2 hours later, I sat across from Wright in his mahogany-paneled office surrounded by leather-bound legal books and the smell of old paper. He was a distinguished man in his 60s with silver hair and wire-rimmed glasses, and he looked more troubled than I'd ever seen him. "Your grandfather was a very clever man." He began opening a thick file folder. When he updated his will last year, he included provisions that none of your family members were aware of. I was bound by attorney-client privilege not to reveal these details until after his death and the reading of the will. Wright pulled out a document that looked like it had been typed on expensive letterhead. "Your grandfather's estate is worth approximately $2.3 million, including his house investments, life insurance, and business assets. However, he was very concerned about family unity and the potential for conflicts over inheritance." He pointed to a specific paragraph highlighted in yellow. "This clause states that the estate can only be distributed if all immediate family members maintain active, respectful relationships with each other. Any family member who publicly disowns or severs ties with another family member forfeits their right to any portion of the inheritance." My breath caught in my throat. "What exactly does that mean?" Wright leaned forward, his expression grave. "It means your parents' public disownment of you last week has violated the terms of your grandfather's will. I've already received multiple witness statements about the incident, including testimony from neighbors who overheard the confrontation on your parents' porch. Your Aunt Patricia also contacted me to report the details of your banishment." He pulled out another document covered in legal stamps and official seals. "Additionally, your mother posted on her Facebook account that you were no longer part of the family and that their friends should not mention her name in their presence. Screenshots of these posts have been preserved as evidence of the formal severance of family ties." The room felt like it was spinning. "So what happens now?" "Your grandfather specifically designed this will to prevent exactly what your parents have done," Wright explained. "He suspected that family conflicts might arise after his death, and he wanted to protect family unity above financial gain. The will explicitly states that if any family member disowns another, the offending party loses all inheritance rights, and their portion is redistributed to the remaining family members who maintained proper relationships." Wright opened his laptop and showed me bank statements and investment portfolios. Your grandfather's assets are currently frozen pending resolution of this matter. Your parents contacted me yesterday in a panic, claiming their disownment of you was a misunderstanding and begging me to overlook the violation. However, the legal documentation is clear and irrefutable. He handed me copies of the witness statements. Mrs. Patterson, the elderly neighbor who lived next door to my parents, had provided a detailed account of hearing my father shout, "You are not part of this family anymore," loud enough for half the neighborhood to hear. The mailman, David Rodriguez, had witnessed my mother refusing the flower delivery I'd sent, stating loudly that, "No daughter of mine lives here anymore." Your parents are now claiming they want to reconcile, Wright continued. But legally speaking, the damage has already been done. Your grandfather's will doesn't provide exceptions for changed minds or regret. The disownment occurred, it was witnessed and documented, and the consequences are permanent, according to the terms he established. Wright pulled out one final document that made my heart race. There's something else, Eloise. Your grandfather included a personal letter for you to be opened only in the event that other family members violated the unity clause. He handed me an envelope with my name written in my grandfather's familiar handwriting. Inside was a letter dated just 3 months before his death. My dear Eloise, if you are reading this letter, it means someone in our family has chosen inheritance money over family love. I designed my will this way because I've watched too many families destroy themselves fighting over money after the older generation passes away. You've always been the most independent and honest person in our family. You work hard, treat people with respect, and you've never asked me for financial help, even when I knew you were struggling with student loans and starting your career. If your parents have disowned you for not living your life according to their plans, please know that I am not surprised. I've seen the way they pressure you to get married and abandon your dreams. I want you to understand that there is nothing wrong with a woman who chooses her own path in life. Your strength and independence remind me of your grandmother, and I could not be more proud of the woman you have become. The money is not important. What matters is that you continue to live authentically and build the life that makes you happy. But if my suspicions about your parents prove correct, at least my estate can help support your future instead of rewarding their conditional love. I sat in Wright's office holding my grandfather's letter, tears streaming down my face, as I realized the man who truly understood me was gone forever. But his wisdom and love had created a path forward that my parents never could have anticipated. The phone calls started before I even made it home from Wright's office. First my mother, then my father, then both of them together on speakerphone. All 3 calls went to voicemail because I needed time to process what I'd learned before dealing with their sudden change of heart. "Eloise, sweetheart, there's been a terrible misunderstanding." My mother's voice pleaded through the phone speaker in Jessica's car. "Your father and I were just having a difficult day, and we said things we didn't mean. We love you so much, and we want you to come home immediately. Please call us back." The second message came from my father, his tone awkwardly cheerful in a way I'd never heard before. "Princess, your old dad made a big mistake. You know how stubborn I can be sometimes. Mom's making your favorite chocolate chip cookies, and we've set up your old bedroom exactly the way you like it. We're family, and family sticks together no matter what. Come home so we can fix this silly situation." The third voicemail included both of them talking over each other, their desperation bleeding through the phone. They promised to support my career choices, stop pressuring me about marriage, and even help me find a better apartment if I preferred living independently. The performance was so dramatically different from their behavior the previous week that it would have been laughable if it weren't so transparent. But the call that truly revealed their motives came from Tyler the next morning. My brother's voice was shaky and nervous as he explained what had been happening at home since my meeting with Wright. "Eloise, I need to talk to you privately," he said. "Can we meet somewhere Mom and Dad won't see us? There are things you need to know about what's been going on." We arranged to meet at a small coffee shop across town away from our parents' usual haunts. Tyler looked exhausted when he arrived, like he hadn't slept in days. His usually neat brown hair was messy, and he kept glancing around the cafe as if expecting our parents to appear at any moment. "They've completely lost their minds," he said, sliding into the booth across from me. "Yesterday, they spent 4 hours calling everyone they know, trying to get people to change their statements about what happened last Sunday. They even offered Mrs. Patterson $500 to say she misheard Dad's words to you." Tyler pulled out his phone and showed me a series of text messages between him and our parents. They'd been pressuring him to contact me and convince me to forget about the lawyer nonsense and come home immediately. The messages revealed just how much they understood about Grandpa's will and what they stood to lose. "Mom keeps saying this is all about family unity and how much they miss you," Tyler continued. "But I heard them talking in the kitchen last night. They're terrified about losing the inheritance money. Dad already made plans to use his share to pay off the mortgage and buy a new truck. Mom wanted to renovate the kitchen and take that European vacation she's been planning for years." He showed me more text messages, these ones between our parents and various relatives. They'd been frantically trying to control the narrative, claiming I'd overreacted to a minor family disagreement and that everyone was blowing things out of proportion. Aunt Patricia had apparently refused to help them, telling them they'd made their bed and now had to lie in it. But Tyler's most shocking revelation came when he described what our parents had been doing during Grandpa's final months of life. "Eloise, I need to tell you something I should have said a long time ago. Mom and Dad were controlling everything about Grandpa's care, and they deliberately kept you away from him during his last few weeks." My blood ran cold. "What do you mean they kept me away?" "Remember when you wanted to visit him in the nursing home, but they said he was too weak for visitors? That wasn't true. Grandpa kept asking for you, but they told the staff that you were too busy with work to visit. They said you'd ask not to be contacted until his condition improved." Tyler's hands were shaking as he pulled up more evidence on his phone. "I have recordings, Eloise. I started recording their conversations because something felt wrong about how they were handling Grandpa's medical decisions. Listen to this." He played an audio file of our parents talking in their car after visiting the nursing home. My father's voice was clear. "We need to make sure she doesn't get too close to the old man before he dies. If he changes his will to favor her, we'll lose everything we've been counting on." My mother's response made me feel sick. The nursing home staff thinks she's too busy to visit anyway. As long as we control the information flow, we can keep them separated until this is all over. Tyler had more recordings, each one revealing another layer of manipulation and control. Our parents had been intercepting mail from the nursing home, including letters from Grandpa addressed specifically to me. They'd told the medical staff that I was dealing with a personal crisis and couldn't handle updates about his condition. They'd even convinced his doctors that family visits were too emotionally stimulating for his weak heart. "The worst part," Tyler said, his voice breaking, "is that Grandpa died thinking you didn't care about him. The nurses told me he kept asking why you never called or visited. Mom and Dad let him believe you were too selfish to make time for your own grandfather." I sat in that coffee shop booth feeling like someone had ripped my heart out of my chest. Not only had my parents disowned me for refusing to live my life according to their plans, but they'd also stolen my chance to say goodbye to the man who'd loved and understood me most. They'd manipulated an elderly dying man's final weeks to serve their own financial interests. Tyler reached across the table and grabbed my hand. "I'm so sorry I didn't tell you sooner. I was scared of them, scared of what would happen if I went against their wishes. But seeing how they're treating you now, trying to manipulate you into giving up your rights to Grandpa's estate, I can't stay silent anymore." He pulled out one more piece of evidence that changed everything. "Eloise, there's something else. I found this in Dad's desk drawer last night." Tyler handed me a photocopy of documents from the nursing home showing that our parents had been given power of attorney over Grandpa's financial affairs during his final month of life. The signatures on the documents didn't look quite right, and several dates had been altered with whiteout. "I think they forged some of these signatures," Tyler whispered. "And look at this." He showed me bank statements indicating that large sums of money had been transferred from Grandpa's accounts to our parents' accounts during the weeks before his death. The timing coincided perfectly with when they'd been keeping me away from him and controlling all communication with his medical team. As I stared at the evidence of my parents' deception and manipulation, I realized that their current desperation to reconcile with me wasn't motivated by love or regret. They were terrified that their illegal activities would be exposed during the investigation into Grandpa's will. They needed me to drop any legal challenges and accept their version of events to protect themselves from criminal charges. Armed with Tyler's evidence, I returned to Harrison Wright's office the next morning with a determination I'd never felt before. The elderly attorney listened carefully as I explained what my brother had discovered, examining each document and audio recording with the intensity of a detective solving a complex case. "This changes everything," Wright said, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. "What we're looking at here goes far beyond violating your grandfather's will. If these signatures are forged and these bank transfers were unauthorized, we're dealing with elder abuse fraud and potentially embezzlement." Wright immediately contacted Sarah Chen, a criminal defense attorney who specialized in financial crimes and elder abuse cases. Chen arrived at Wright's office within an hour, bringing with her a team of forensic accountants and document analysis experts. Sarah Chen was a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s with short black hair and an intensity that reminded me of a prosecutor on television. She spread Tyler's evidence across Wright's conference table and began organizing it into categories: forged documents, unauthorized financial transfers, evidence of isolation and manipulation, and proof of deliberate obstruction of family relationships. "Your parents have been very busy," Chen said, studying the bank statements through a magnifying glass. "These transfers total $180,000, all occurring during the 6 weeks before your grandfather's death. The timing suggests they knew his condition was deteriorating and wanted to secure access to his assets before anyone could intervene." Chen's forensic accountant, a meticulous man named David Park, used specialized software to analyze the signatures on the power of attorney documents. Within 20 minutes, he had conclusive proof that several signatures had been forged. "The pressure variations and pen angle are completely inconsistent with your grandfather's known writing patterns," Park explained, pointing to microscopic differences visible only under his digital analysis equipment. "These signatures were traced, not written, naturally. Additionally, the dates have been altered on multiple documents to make the transfers appear legitimate." But Chen's most disturbing discovery came when she examined the nursing home's visitor logs and medical records. "Your parents had your grandfather's communication restricted during his final month," she said, showing me official forms they'd filed with the nursing home administration. They claimed he was suffering from dementia and that outside communication was medically contraindicated due to his fragile emotional state. The medical records told a different story. Grandpa's cognitive function tests were normal until his final week of life. His nurses noted that he was alert-oriented and repeatedly asking to speak with his granddaughter. The nursing staff had been told by my parents that I was dealing with a family crisis and couldn't handle communication about his condition. Chen pulled out another document that made my stomach turn. "Your parents also filed paperwork claiming that you had requested not to be contacted about medical updates because you were too emotionally fragile to handle information about your grandfather's declining health. The nursing home honored this request, thinking they were protecting you from distressing news." Wright shook his head in disbelief. "So they not only manipulated your grandfather's access to you, but they also convinced the medical facility that you didn't want to be involved in his care. They created a complete fiction to justify keeping you separated." Chen's investigation revealed even more shocking details. Security footage from the nursing home showed my parents accessing Grandpa's room frequently, often when the nursing staff was busy with other patients. During these visits, they had removed personal items from his bedside table, including what appeared to be letters and photographs. "We need to examine your grandfather's personal effects," Chen said. "If your parents removed correspondence intended for you that constitutes mail theft in addition to all the other charges, The breakthrough came when Chen's team obtained a warrant to search my parents' house. Hidden in my father's desk drawer, investigators found a manila envelope containing 12 letters my grandfather had written to me during his final months, all of which had been intercepted before reaching their destination. Reading those letters in Chen's office was like having a conversation with my grandfather from beyond the grave. His handwriting grew weaker with each letter, but his love and concern for me remained constant throughout his illness. My dear Eloise, one letter began, "I don't understand why you haven't visited or called. The nurses tell me you're too busy, but that doesn't sound like the granddaughter I know. I'm worried that your parents have said something to hurt your feelings. Please don't let their expectations change who you are." Another letter written just 2 weeks before his death revealed how much he'd been thinking about me. "I've asked your parents to bring you for a visit, but they say you're dealing with personal problems and can't handle seeing me in this condition. I wish I could tell you that I understand whatever you're going through and that I love you no matter what path you choose in life." The final letter, dated 3 days before his death, was the most heartbreaking. "Eloise, if something happens to me and you're reading this later, please know that I never stopped wanting to see you. I've left instructions with my attorney about my will, and I hope my decisions help you understand how proud I am of the strong, independent woman you've become. Don't let anyone make you feel ashamed of choosing your own happiness over their expectations." Chen's forensic team also discovered that my parents had been systematically deleting voicemails I'd left on Grandpa's nursing home phone during his final weeks. The phone system kept digital records of all messages, and investigators were able to recover recordings of my voice, asking about his condition and requesting permission to visit. "Your parents were operating a comprehensive scheme to control all communication between you and your grandfather," Chen explained. "They deleted your messages, intercepted his letters to you, told the nursing staff you didn't want contact, and told him you were too busy to visit. They created a complete information blackout to serve their financial interests." But the most damning evidence came from security cameras at the bank, where Grandpa had kept his accounts. Footage showed my parents visiting the bank multiple times during his final month using power of attorney documents that had been signed, while Grandpa was supposedly too confused to make medical decisions. The bank records show they were accessing his safety deposit box and making large withdrawals, Park reported. They were literally emptying his accounts while telling everyone he was too mentally impaired to handle his own affairs. Chen assembled all the evidence into a comprehensive case file that painted a picture of elder abuse, financial fraud, and systematic family manipulation, spanning several months. The criminal charges would include forgery, embezzlement, mail theft, elder abuse, and fraud. "Your parents aren't just facing loss of inheritance rights," Chen told me grimly. "They're looking at potential prison sentences ranging from 5 to 15 years, depending on how the charges are filed and whether they accept a plea agreement." As I sat in that conference room surrounded by evidence of my parents' crimes, I felt a mixture of vindication and sadness. They'd destroyed any chance of a genuine relationship with me, not because they disapproved of my life choices, but because they'd been planning to steal from my grandfather and needed me out of the way to accomplish their scheme. The family who had claimed to love me had actually been protecting their criminal enterprise, and their recent attempts at reconciliation were just another manipulation designed to keep me from discovering the truth about what they'd done to the man who truly loved me. Chen advised me to arrange one final family meeting before criminal charges were officially filed. Sometimes confronting perpetrators with evidence gives them an opportunity to confess and cooperate, she explained. It might also reveal additional crimes or accomplices we haven't discovered yet. Tyler agreed to help by secretly recording the conversation using a small digital recorder Chen's team provided. We arranged to meet at my parents' house under the pretense that I was ready to work things out and return to the family fold. I drove to my childhood home on a gray Thursday afternoon, carrying a folder filled with copies of all the evidence Chen's team had gathered. Tyler met me at the front door, his face pale with nervous anticipation. He'd already positioned the recording device in the living room hidden inside a decorative plant on the bookshelf. My parents greeted me with exaggerated warmth that felt like a performance staged for an audience of one. My mother hugged me tightly and commented on how thin I looked, insisting she needed to make me a proper meal. My father clapped me on the shoulder and said he'd been looking forward to this conversation for days. We sat in the same living room where I'd played board games as a child, but the atmosphere felt charged with tension and unspoken threats. My mother served coffee and homemade cookies as if this were a pleasant social visit instead of a confrontation about their criminal behavior. "We're so glad you've come to your senses." My father began settling into his favorite recliner. "This whole situation with the lawyer and the will has gotten completely out of hand. We just need to present a united front as a family, and everything will work out fine." I opened my folder and spread the bank statements across the coffee table. "Before we talk about family unity, I need you to explain these financial transfers from Grandpa's accounts." The change in their expressions was immediate and dramatic. My mother's smile vanished completely, and my father's face turned red with what looked like a mixture of anger and panic. "Where did you get those?" my mother demanded, reaching for the documents. I pulled them back and laid out more evidence: the forged signatures, the intercepted letters, the nursing home records, showing how they'd restricted Grandpa's communication. "I also want you to explain why Grandpa wrote 12 letters to me that I never received, and why you told the nursing home I was too fragile to handle information about his condition." My father stood up abruptly, knocking over his coffee cup. "You have no right to go through private family documents. Those papers are none of your business." "Actually, dad fraud and elder abuse are everyone's business," I replied, maintaining calm despite my racing heart, especially when they involve stealing from a dying man and manipulating his final months of life. Tyler shifted uncomfortably on the couch, but he kept his expression neutral as my parents began to realize how much I knew about their activities. My mother's voice became shrill and defensive. "Your grandfather was confused and easily manipulated in his final weeks. We were protecting him from people who might have taken advantage of his vulnerable condition. People like me." I asked, pulling out copies of Grandpa's cognitive function tests, because according to his medical records, he was mentally sharp until his final week of life. The only people taking advantage of his vulnerable condition were the two of you. My father's anger erupted like a volcano. "You ungrateful little brat. We spent years taking care of him, visiting him every week, managing his medical care, while you were off playing career woman and ignoring your family responsibilities. We deserve that money for all the sacrifices we made." "So you admit you took the money?" I asked, watching Tyler's eyes widen as he realized our father had just confessed to theft. My mother tried to backtrack, but the damage was already done. "We didn't take anything that wasn't rightfully ours. Your grandfather wanted us to have access to his accounts to help with his care expenses." I showed them the security footage screenshots from the bank. "Is that why you were emptying his safety deposit box and transferring money to your personal accounts to pay for his care?" The room fell silent except for the sound of my father's heavy breathing. My mother stared at the photographs of them at the bank, her face growing pale as she realized how much evidence existed of their activities. "Your grandfather was dying anyway," my father said finally, his voice cold and calculating. "The money was going to be ours eventually. We just made sure it didn't get tied up in legal complications or wasted on expensive medical treatments that weren't going to save him." I felt physically sick hearing him talk about Grandpa's death like it was an inconvenient delay in their financial planning. "Are you saying you made decisions about his medical care based on your inheritance expectations?" My mother's composure cracked completely. "You don't understand the pressure we were under. Your grandfather was spending thousands of dollars every month on that nursing home, and the doctors wanted to try expensive treatments that might have prolonged his suffering for months. We were thinking about his dignity and our family's financial future. What you were thinking about," I said, pulling out Grandpa's letters, "was making sure he died before he could change his will or reconnect with me. That's why you kept us separated and made him believe I didn't care about him." Tyler was recording every word as my parents continued to justify their behavior with increasingly desperate explanations. They claimed they'd been protecting Grandpa from emotional manipulation, protecting me from unnecessary stress, and protecting the family from financial irresponsibility. But their true motivations became clear when my father's temper finally exploded completely. We worked for 40 years to build a relationship with that stubborn old man. You think you can just waltz in here with your college degree and your independent attitude and steal what we've earned. We sacrificed our entire adult lives, taking care of family obligations while you pursued your selfish dreams. So this was never about my lifestyle choices or my refusal to get married. I said, finally understanding their real agenda. This was about money, and you needed me out of the picture to steal from Grandpa without interference. My mother started crying, but her tears felt manipulative rather than genuine. We never meant for things to go this far. We just wanted to secure our future and make sure the family money stayed in the family where it belonged. The money did stay in the family, I replied. Grandpa left it to his family members who actually loved him instead of the ones who stole from him. That's when Tyler revealed what he'd been doing throughout the entire conversation. He pulled out his phone and showed them that he'd been live streaming our conversation to a private social media account where several family members and friends had been watching in real time. Everything you just said has been recorded and witnessed. Tyler announced, his voice shaking but determined. Aunt Patricia, Uncle Jim, and 6 other family members heard you admit to stealing from Grandpa and manipulating his medical care. My parents stared at Tyler's phone screen in horror as they realized their confessions had been broadcast to the very people who would serve as witnesses in their criminal trial. My father lunged toward Tyler, trying to grab the phone, but my brother was faster and younger. "It's too late, Dad. The recording is already saved and backed up. Everyone knows the truth now." My mother collapsed onto the couch, sobbing hysterically as she realized the full scope of their exposure. Not only had they confessed to crimes in front of witnesses, but their entire extended family and social circle now knew what kind of people they really were. "You've destroyed us," my father said to me, his voice filled with venom. "Your own parents. Are you happy now?" I looked at this man who had raised me, who had taught me to ride a bicycle and helped me with homework, who had once been my hero. "You destroyed yourselves when you chose money over love. You destroyed your relationship with me when you decided I was less important than your inheritance. And you destroyed Grandpa's final months when you stole from him and kept him from the people who actually cared about him." As I gathered my evidence and prepared to leave their house for the last time, Tyler made his own announcement. "I'm moving out tonight. I can't live with people who would steal from their own father and lie to their own daughter. Eloise, I want to help you make sure Grandpa gets justice, even if it means testifying against them in court." The last thing I heard as we walked out the front door was my mother screaming that we were destroying the family, and my father shouting that we'd regret this betrayal for the rest of our lives. But as Tyler and I drove away from that house of lies and manipulation, I felt lighter than I had in years. The truth was finally exposed, and the people who had claimed to love me could no longer hide behind their facade of family values and moral superiority. The criminal charges were filed within 48 hours of our recorded confrontation. Sarah Chen presented the evidence to the district attorney's office, and within a week, my parents were arrested on multiple felony counts, including elder abuse fraud, embezzlement, forgery, and mail theft. The local newspaper picked up the story because financial crimes against elderly victims had become a significant problem in our community. The headline read, "Local couple accused of stealing from dying father manipulating estate." The article detailed how my parents had systematically isolated their father, forged documents, and embezzled nearly $200,000 while controlling his medical care decisions. But the story took an unexpected turn when Chen's investigation uncovered the biggest secret of all. While reviewing my grandfather's personal papers more thoroughly, she discovered documents that revealed I had been adopted as an infant after my biological parents died in a car accident. "Your grandfather kept these records in a separate safety deposit box," Chen explained, showing me the adoption papers and original birth certificate. It appears your adoptive parents never told you about your biological family, but your grandfather maintained detailed records of your origins. The adoption papers revealed that my biological parents, David and Susan Mitchell, had been close friends of my grandfather's deceased daughter, Carolyn. When they died in an automobile accident, I was only 6 months old with no other living relatives. My grandfather had arranged for his son, Robert, and daughter-in-law, Martha, to adopt me, providing financial support to help with the costs of raising an additional child. But the most shocking discovery came in a series of letters my grandfather had written to his attorney over the years, expressing his concerns about how my adoptive parents were treating me compared to their biological son, Tyler. Your grandfather was documenting a pattern of differential treatment going back to your childhood, Chen said, showing me his handwritten notes. He was worried that your parents saw you as less entitled to family resources because you weren't biologically related to them. One letter written when I was in high school described my grandfather's frustration with my parents' attitude toward my educational expenses. Robert and Martha spent $15,000 on Tyler's baseball equipment and summer camps this year, but they claim they can't afford to help Eloise with her college application fees. They seem to forget that I provided them with substantial financial assistance, specifically to ensure both children received equal opportunities. Another letter written during my college years revealed even more troubling observations. I've offered to help pay for Eloise's education, but Robert insists she should earn her own way, since she's not really family blood. Meanwhile, they're planning to give Tyler a down payment for a house as a graduation gift. The difference in their treatment has become impossible to ignore. My grandfather's final letter to his attorney, written just months before his death, explained his decision to restructure his will. I've decided to leave the majority of my estate to Eloise because she's the one who truly embodies the values I tried to instill in my family. Her adoptive parents have never fully accepted her as their equal, and I suspect they've been planning to exclude her from family inheritance for years. If I don't intervene, she'll be left with nothing, while Tyler inherits everything, simply because he shares their DNA. Reading these letters, I finally understood why my parents had been so determined to keep me away from my grandfather during his final months. They'd known about his concerns regarding their treatment of me, and they'd been afraid he would change his will to address the inequality he'd observed throughout my childhood. But my grandfather had been even more perceptive than I'd realized. Hidden in his safety deposit box, Chen found evidence that my adoptive parents had been intercepting cards and gifts he'd tried to send me over the years. Birthday checks that had been deposited into accounts I'd never seen, Christmas presents that had been returned to stores without my knowledge, and college graduation gifts that had never reached me. Your grandfather was trying to provide additional support for you throughout your life, Chen explained. But your adoptive parents were intercepting everything and keeping it for themselves. They've been stealing from you for decades, not just from him. Tyler was as shocked as I was to learn about my adoption and the years of financial manipulation. I always wondered why Mom and Dad treated you differently, he said when we met at Chen's office to review the evidence. I thought maybe it was because you were more independent or because they disagreed with your choices. I never imagined it was because they didn't consider you a real member of the family. The financial records revealed that over 18 years, my parents had diverted approximately $75,000 in gifts and support that my grandfather had intended specifically for me. They'd used the money for Tyler's expenses, home improvements, family vacations, and other purchases that benefited everyone except the person the money was meant to help. Chen filed additional charges related to the decades of theft and fraud, and the probate court began the process of determining restitution for all the money my parents had stolen from both me and my grandfather over the years. But beyond the legal victories, the most important discovery was learning the truth about my biological family. My grandfather had maintained relationships with friends who remembered my birth parents, and Chen was able to connect me with people who had known David and Susan Mitchell. Mrs. Eleanor Hayes, who had been my biological mother's college roommate, met with me at a small cafe near the university, where my birth mother had studied art history. She brought photo albums and stories that filled in the gaps of my identity I'd never known existed. "Your mother, Susan, was the most independent woman I ever met," Mrs. Hayes said, showing me pictures of a young woman who looked remarkably like me. She was determined to have a career and travel the world before settling down. She met your father, David, at an art gallery opening, and they bonded over their shared love of adventure and creativity. The photographs revealed that I had inherited my biological mother's eyes, her smile, and apparently her stubborn streak. Mrs. Hayes described how Susan had refused to give up her maiden name when she married, how she'd insisted on pursuing her master's degree even after becoming pregnant, and how she'd planned to raise her daughter to be strong and self-reliant. "She would be so proud of the woman you've become," Mrs. Hayes said, tears in her eyes. "You have her spirit and her determination to live life on your own terms." Tyler joined me for these conversations about my biological family, and our relationship grew stronger as we both processed the lies our adoptive parents had built their entire family structure around. He realized that his privileged position in the family hadn't been based on merit or love, but simply on the accident of sharing their DNA. "I want to make things right," Tyler told me after one of our meetings with Mrs. Hayes. "I got 18 years of extra support and attention that should have been shared equally. I want us to be real siblings now, the way Grandpa intended." Together, we decided to use my grandfather's inheritance not just for our individual benefit, but to create something that would honor both his memory and my biological parents' values. We plan to establish a nonprofit organization supporting elderly people who faced family manipulation and financial abuse, while also providing scholarships for young women pursuing independent careers despite family pressure. 6 months later, I stood in the courthouse as the judge delivered my parents' sentences. My father received 8 years in federal prison for elder abuse, fraud, and embezzlement. My mother received 6 years for her role in the scheme and her cooperation with investigators. Both were ordered to pay full restitution totaling over $300,000, including the money they'd stolen from my grandfather and the gifts they'd diverted from me throughout my childhood. The judge's words during sentencing captured the gravity of their crimes. The defendant systematically abused an elderly family member during his most vulnerable period, manipulating his medical care and isolating him from loved ones for their own financial gain. Their actions represent a profound betrayal of family trust and basic human decency. Tyler and I sat together in the courtroom holding hands as we watched the people who had raised us being led away in handcuffs. I felt no satisfaction in their punishment, only sadness for the family relationships that had been built on lies and manipulation instead of genuine love. But outside the courthouse, we were greeted by the new family we'd been building over the past months. Jessica had become my chosen sister, supporting me through every step of the legal process and helping me create a stable home base while my world transformed. Mrs. Hayes and 3 other friends of my biological parents had embraced me as the daughter they'd watched over from a distance for 28 years. The probate court had awarded my grandfather's entire estate to Tyler and me, recognizing that our adoptive parents' criminal behavior had violated every condition of his will. But more importantly, we'd found letters and documents that revealed how much my grandfather had truly loved us both and how carefully he'd planned to support our individual dreams and aspirations. Tyler used his portion of the inheritance to complete his education and start a career in social work specializing in elder care advocacy. "I want to prevent what happened to Grandpa from happening to other families," he explained. "I want to help people recognize the warning signs of elder abuse before it's too late." I used my inheritance to establish the Caroline Mitchell Foundation, named after my grandfather's daughter, who had died young. The organization provided free legal services to elderly individuals facing family manipulation, while also offering scholarships to young women pursuing careers in fields traditionally dominated by men. Our first major initiative was creating a support network for families dealing with inheritance disputes and financial elder abuse. We partnered with Sarah Chen's law firm to provide pro bono legal services, and we worked with social workers like Tyler to identify vulnerable elderly individuals before exploitation occurred. The foundation also funded research into the psychological dynamics of family financial abuse, helping develop educational materials that could teach people to recognize manipulation tactics and protect themselves from exploitation by relatives. But perhaps the most meaningful aspect of our work was the scholarship program that honored my biological mother's memory. Each year, we provided financial support to 12 young women who demonstrated independence, academic excellence, and determination to pursue careers despite family pressure to follow more traditional paths. Meeting our scholarship recipients reminded me constantly of my own journey toward independence and authenticity. These young women faced pressure to get married instead of pursuing graduate school, to choose practical majors instead of following their passions, and to prioritize family expectations over personal fulfillment. One recipient, a 20-year-old engineering student named Rachel, wrote me a letter that could have been describing my own experience. My parents keep telling me that I'm being selfish by focusing on my career instead of finding a husband. They say I'll regret not having children and that my education is a waste of money. Your foundation's support means I can continue pursuing my dreams even when my family withdraws their financial and emotional support. 2 years after my grandfather's death, Tyler and I organized the first annual memorial dinner in his honor. We invited Mrs. Hayes, the other friends of my biological parents, Jessica, and the extended family members who had supported us throughout the legal proceedings. Aunt Patricia gave a speech that brought tears to everyone's eyes. William would be so proud to see how you've transformed tragedy into purpose and how you've chosen to honor his memory by protecting other families from the kind of manipulation and abuse you experienced. The evening felt like the kind of family gathering my grandfather had envisioned when he designed his will to promote family unity. But instead of being built around biological relationships or inheritance money, our new family was based on shared values, mutual respect, and genuine care for each other's well-being. Jessica stood up during dinner to make an announcement that surprised everyone. Eloise and Tyler aren't just my closest friends, they're the siblings I chose for myself. We've decided to make our relationship official by legally changing our last names to honor their grandfather's memory. From now on, we'll all be members of the Williams family, carrying forward his legacy of love, integrity, and support for independent thinking. As I looked around the table at the people who had become my true family, I realized that my grandfather's greatest gift hadn't been his money or his house. His greatest gift had been teaching me that authentic family relationships are built on unconditional love and mutual respect, not on control, manipulation, or shared DNA. The young woman who had been disowned for refusing to live according to her parents' expectations had found her real home with people who celebrated her independence and supported her dreams. The inheritance money had provided security and opportunities, but the relationships I'd built with people who truly understood me were worth far more than any financial windfall. Tyler and I still visit my grandfather's grave every month, bringing fresh flowers and updates about the foundation's work. We tell him about the elderly individuals we've helped protect, the young women who've received scholarships, and the families who've avoided the kind of manipulation and abuse we experienced. But mostly we thank him for having the wisdom to see beyond the surface of family relationships and the courage to design his legacy in a way that promoted genuine love over conditional acceptance. His will hadn't just protected his money from people who would have misused it. It had protected his grandchildren from a lifetime of manipulation and emotional abuse. The life lesson that emerged from this painful experience became the foundation of everything I built afterward. True family is not determined by blood relations or legal obligations, but by the people who love you unconditionally, support your authentic self, and celebrate your independence, rather than trying to control your choices. Sometimes losing toxic relationships, even with people who claim to love you, is the only way to discover your real worth and find the people who will genuinely cherish the person you are meant to become. Have you ever had to choose between family expectations and your own happiness? I'd love to hear about your experiences with finding your authentic path, even when it meant disappointing people you love. Please share your stories in the comments below, and don't forget to like this video if it resonated with your own journey toward independence and self-discovery. Subscribe to this channel for more stories about overcoming family challenges and building the life you truly want. And please share this video with anyone who might be struggling with family pressure to live according to other people's expectations rather than their own dreams. Thank you for listening to my story and for being part of this community of people who believe in the power of authentic living. I hope you find the courage to build relationships based on genuine love and mutual respect, and I wish you all the strength you need to create the family and life you truly deserve.